And now, Michael Ward with the most famous words in motorsports.
Drivers, start your engines.
You are now listening to the fastest show on IE Sports Radio. My name is Daryl Kinsey Jr. and welcome you to take another lap of the extra mile for today, May 14th, 2020. And ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in 2 months, it is time to go racing once again. NASCAR ready to get things back going for the international motorsports community this weekend in Darlington, the first of 2 events, first of 7 races in 14 days for NASCAR as they get their season back going. And to help me talk about all of that are my co-hosts for this evening, Caitlin Seam and Michael Ward.
Thank you, You're far too kind.
I hope everyone's doing well. The COVID-19 restrictions are slowly starting to roll back. Whether they should or shouldn't is the topic for, another program. But here we are getting ready to go racing again. And guys, it feels like an eternity since we've actually talked about an actual race weekend, because we were originally discussing Atlanta running with no fans, and then the next day gets canceled entirely. And since then, we've gone through the multitude of iRacing sim series that have popped up, and that has tied us over. But it feels good to finally have some real live racing coming back.
It feels a little bit like a fever dream to me.
It definitely feels great, but I don't know, though, because of all this, I kind of feel a little uneasy about it.
I think we all have that unease right now, seeing as we really don't have the testing or a real treatment right now, but we're opening up anyway. So there's a huge concern. And I think we're all worried about what happens if a driver tests positive. Knock on wood, it won't, or they won't. But on the positive side, we are getting to see racing again. Unfortunately, these races are getting put in because Sonoma, Chicagoland, and Richmond are missing dates. We won't be going to Chicagoland or Sonoma entirely. So the Real Heroes 400, which is being run to honor everyone in the medical profession that's currently working to fight COVID-19. This will be a 400-mile event on Sunday at Darlington. The problem is we're losing the races from the 3 tracks I just named, and the big problem is that now there's no racing at Chicagoland, and we saw that the next day that plan came out, and everybody started saying that Chicagoland was dead, and we were starting to write its eulogy. Come to find out, it's not. But Sonoma is in trouble because their Cup race is now gone, and there's no guarantee they're going to have their drag race, as the NHRA is pushed back to August, so we don't know what that schedule is going to look like. We already saw in NASCAR the next stage of realignment. Iowa has lost their date entirely. There's a lot of racetracks that are going to be missing a year's worth of income, and it's going to be worrisome how those tracks deal with the future.
I kind of feel like if this was a meme, it would be Rockingham looking at these tracks that lost their dates going, is this your first time?
Oh, God, you mean that meme? First time, huh?
That's all I can think about with it.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing about it is that, yeah, there's worry to be done, but I don't think they're going to be the only tracks to be in this situation. I think we're going to be hearing a lot more of them. Earlier today, NASCAR did drop a new schedule as well, and I know like Kansas wasn't on there, and they were supposed to be next up, and Michigan wasn't on there for obvious reasons, really, for the fact that everything's still shut down up there. So I think that things with the shuffle, it's going to be interesting to see what they can and cannot keep, just for the fact that a lot of it, yes, no matter how much NASCAR is like, we're going racing, we're going to do it whether you like it or not, you still have to abide by state laws. So I think that's going to be a big part of it as well, for who's going to stay and who's going to go, because, you know, like I said, as much as the racing gods want everything to happen, even if we don't have fans at tracks, it still is going to come down to the legislation of the state.
Yeah, it's going to be a while to see, as more states are opening up, what they're going to do. We've already seen that here in the local ranks, where Potomac Speedway was going to have a test session on Saturday, and that was called off by the state. We may not see local racing until June at the earliest at this juncture, and who knows then, we may see a spike in cases and they decide to shut everything down again, which I don't see that happening. I know that that's part of the plan, but honestly, you've already let the genie out the bottle. You're not putting it back in, because these people are not going to sit home anymore. So
I kind of think at this point, if things escalate and get worse, it's going to turn into martial law. Like, I think that's the only way things could get shut back down again. Like, I don't think people will listen elsewise.
No, and that's going to cause its own issues, but hopefully we won't have to cross that bridge. But there was other racing news out of the Formula One ranks this week, and well, if they were filming for F1 Drive to Survive right now, this would be a really spicy episode, as Daniel Ricciardo is making the jump from Renault to McLaren, as Carlos Sainz is going to Ferrari because they could not get a deal done with Sebastian Vettel. Vettel is now out of that seat. Guys, this kind of came out of left field. What did you think when you heard about this change up in the F1 grid?
I liked it. I found it highly entertaining. Let's shake it up.
Definitely came out of nowhere, but it was interesting to see how everybody just ran around and, you know, all the different rumors that happened. You know, oh, Vettel's leaving Ferrari. Is he going to Mercedes? Is Hamilton going to Ferrari?
I think the funny thing is that I bet you half of the people involved in this were in bathrobes and slippers when it happened.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, without a doubt. Or they won't. or not to be nasty, they were on the toilet.
I hope not. I don't want to think about that. But where do you think Vettel
this
goes
is the dumps.
At this point?
I couldn't help it.
So that opens up a seat at Renault. Now we have to decide who's going to go there, and where is Vettel going to go? Does he stay in F1? Does he go race something else?
I'm thinking he's
retire?
retiring, honestly. Like, I'm thinking he's done, or because I know people like Vettel. Vettel's not going to want to stay at like this midfield team and just run at 7th and 8th for a long amount of time.
Definitely not at this point in his career.
So I don't think he's gonna just sit there and be like, you know, I'm gonna go to we'll bring up Grosjean. We'll get rid of Grosjean and I'll run in Haas for the majority until I feel like it's time to go. I don't think that's Vettel. So I think he either goes and retires from F1, maybe does Formula E, maybe does GT3 or any other type of hell, maybe even IndyCar. I think he'll just go either retire or do something else. Mm-hmm. Formula One, I think that's done.
How old is he?
He's closing in on 40. I'll get I'll get an exact age here in a minute.
Does he have family? Like, is he married, kids, or do we know?
I think he's got 2 children. He's actually 32.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Oh, weird. It's awkward. I mean, depending on how much sway his wife has, he might retire. I mean, you're losing a Formula One seat. You have money. Clearly, he's not going to be strapped for cash. With 2 kids and, that family and that age, I mean, it's not like he's out of his racing prime. But, I mean, I don't know. I think at this point, if there's no guarantee for him to go up, he should just go home.
Well, I mean, there's only one place to go up, and that's Ferrari, and unless Hamilton is going to switch to Ferrari, which I don't see that happening. I see Mercedes doing everything they can to keep him under contract, especially with the new rules staying in place, or the current rules staying in place next year. So he's got a chance to get that 8th title before he retires, which, let's be honest, he's probably going to get it. That's provided we get to 7.
And also,
we race
Hamilton retiring is a little bit more realistic in the coming years because he is getting up there in age.
Yeah, Hamilton is the one
just a little bit
close.
How old's Hamilton?
He is 35, so he's getting close to 40.
Yeah, and if he wants a family and not being archaic when he
now,
has
if he didn't care about a family, I can see him continue on until he's like 40. But
yeah,
But
too is he has mentioned that depending on what happens with the schedule, because he did say that if Formula One added more races, he would leave.
Which makes sense because the schedule is getting bloated as it is, and now they're trying to add that second race. Well, they've added the second race in Miami. There's no off time with this schedule anymore, so I completely understand that. Especially, he does still look, mid-20s, but he's actually 35. It's getting harder for him to get into that F1 shape and keep it. And I can understand trying to take a little break right now because we're wanting to get out now because the schedule's just getting so far bloated.
Yeah, and when money isn't an issue like it's going to be with them, you're going to want to leave when you still have life to live too.
Exactly.
I think Carl Edwards is a good example of that. I mean, he wasn't even nearly on top as much as that. And, that was a big reason he left, is health and family, and wanted to enjoy his life while he still could.
Yeah, and Carl has not made any movement to come back, so I don't think we're going to see him.
Nah. He done. Yep. I think the only time he's going to come back is when they induct him into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Which could come as early as this year if he ends up in the first ballot, which I don't know if he will, but we can talk a little bit about that on the other side of this break. We're going to take a quick break. We're waiting for our guest to call in. Sting Ray Robb is going to join us on the program this evening. That is one of the most unique names in motorsports. And we're going to talk to him about the Pro Series, about the Pro 2000 Series, and working his way up to IndyCar, and also figure out what are. We're also going to talk about his start in karting as well. So you're going to want to listen to that. We'll be right back here on the Extra Mile on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Were you listening to a great game on USRN, but then the Wi-Fi crashed in the final seconds? Or do you simply want to listen to the best calls we here at USRN have to offer? Well, then you need to go check out our Audio Boom page. It holds a collection of our best calls that you don't want to miss. How do I get there, you ask? You can download the Audio Boom app and look up Ultimate Sports Radio, or simply go to audiobook.com/Ultimate Sports Radio. And as always, thanks for listening and making USRN one of the most talked about sports networks on Mixler.com.
Hey guys, it's Blake Henley, better known as H-Town Blake to some of you. Happy to announce that Bases Loaded is back in full force. We'll be bringing that high heat every Tuesday night here on IE Sports Radio. So come home, get ready, dig into that batter's box, and see if you can chase that high heat, baby. So we'll be coming to you live with all the stats, all the rundowns, all the division rivalries, and every team that's going to make the playoff push to get to that one and only October and get to the pinnacle of what baseball is, to hoist that Commissioner's Trophy when it's all said and done.
Hey, what's up, sports fans? You're looking for a different type of sports talk show, something you haven't heard before? You gotta check out the BS3 Sports Show every other Saturday on 2 Live Stews Radio, 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern. Sports talk at its finest. Always have great guests, playing some good hip-hop. You don't want to miss it. Make sure to tune in to the BS3 Sports Show every other Saturday at 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern.
Here comes the pitch, and it comes in wide.
On the BS3 Sports Show.
Welcome to the BS3 Sports Podcast. We hope your experience with us is amazing. Sports talk, comedy, social issues, and more. BS3 is the best source. Can you dig it, son?
And we are back on the Extra Mile here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And our guest is on the line now. He has one of the most unique names in motorsports, and when you hear it, it's one of those names, I mean, that kind of reminds me of Scott Speed or Will Power, where you are destined to get in a race car and go real fast. Joining us now in his third year in the Pro Mazda 2000 Series, driving for Juncos Racing, from all the way from Idaho, it's Sting Ray Robb. Sting Ray, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we have been looking forward to this, and let's go ahead and get into it. You, like most of the open wheel community, you guys were in St. Pete getting ready to race when the doors just kind of got slammed on that idea. Talk a little bit about that day. Where were you on that Friday, and what were your emotions after that happened?
Well, you know, St. Pete is always kind of the best race of the year because it opens up everything for the rest of the season. And so we always have that 3-week build-up that, you know, we're getting ready, testing, and the team's working hard to get the car ready to go, and then you show up at St. Pete expecting to have, you know, a good platform to go into the next few races. And so, you know, the first 4 weeks before that, I was on the road. And so to enter St. Pete with that ambition to, you know, start on the podium and hopefully have a good run at, you know, getting a win, getting in the season is kind of, I mean, now looking back, it's kind of frustrating because you have all that adrenaline building up. And that Friday, you know, my grandparents always go to all the races with me, and they weren't even allowed into the race because there was no fans allowed. And we go out for our first practice session, and we're third in the session there, I think, third or second, and come in, and we're downloading data, going over video, and my engineer walks in and says, "All right, pack your bags, time to go, get out of here." So it's kind of crazy to look back at it now. It feels like so long ago.
So you actually were in the middle of film study, and your engineer just comes in and says, yeah, we're not racing today. I know everyone that weekend was trying to run without fans, but given the situation, it was just not worth it. So you don't get to start the season. The first few races of the year have been canceled. Now the season is not going to start until June. How do you stay mentally prepared to get into the car when you were there, ready to go, and then it's like the off season just gets extended?
Yeah. Well, and to be honest, I think this whole COVID thing has kind of been a blessing for my racing career, just because end of the year, like last year we ended it at Portland, all the way up until we start testing again right before St. Pete, I'm usually not doing any racing. And so this is kind of just an extended break for me. Whereas many other drivers are testing and doing a lot of off-season prep work so that they're ready for the next season to start up. And now it's kind of leveled that playing field for me a little bit, where no one's allowed to test. No one's allowed to go out and practice. So I think everyone's getting to experience what I usually experience during the off-season. It's just a little bit longer now. And luckily there are so many tools available to drivers so that we can, stay sharp, make sure that we know what we're doing when the season starts back up. One of the things that I've found to be really helpful, though, during this time is my training. A lot of gyms are closed, but I do have access so that I can be getting stronger, getting fitter. That way, when I get back into the car, that I'm more prepared. And that way, it takes a lot of mental strain off of you when you're not worried about your muscle fatiguing and all the stuff that you shouldn't be worrying about when you're driving that fast.
So what has gone into your training regimen to stay in race shape for when we get back going, which looks like it's going to be in June, barring any setbacks?
Well, typically what I like to do is do like weightlifting 2 to 3 times a week, and then CrossFit the other days. And that's just because CrossFit allows me to, gain strength and also that cardio that is so necessary in a race car. I mean, when you're out on the racetrack, our heart rate is sky high, and you have to operate like that for the entire race. And it's just because you're traveling, at high rates of speed, inches away from the driver next to you, and you don't know what's going to happen and what they're going to choose to do. So you have to be prepared at all times. So you're on high alert at all times, and that alone is exhausting. So just to have all that, along with the G-forces that we're pulling, and it provides a lot of strain on your body and on your brain as well.
So you worked on your body, and we've seen a lot of drivers. Obviously, iRacing has just become it's become a household name. It already was for motorsports fans. So even now for the casual fans, everyone knows about the iRacing. Have you done any of that during this extended break?
No, I really haven't. The simulator I have set up, everyone is watching the IndyCar series on their iRacing, and Connor Daly's kind of been a good example of drivers that didn't have a previous simulator setup and now is operating on a low budget, office kind of setup. It's kind of fun to watch him. I love watching his Twitch and getting to see those guys joke around and have fun. But for me, my setup's even worse than that. I think I have a negative value when it comes to a simulator setup, and that's just, it creates bad habits for me, and it's not something that I can use to get better at the tracks that I already know. But locally, we have a go-kart track that I've been able to run at a little bit, and I think that's actually more beneficial as a driver, just because it allows you to train how to handle that adrenaline. Because a lot of times when you get back into the seat after a long a break, you kind of don't know what to do with that adrenaline. You lose that focus that you need to, get the job done on the racetrack, and that way you can keep improving while you're out there. Instead of seeing that red mist and just losing all thought altogether. And so I think that's been really good to help my mental side and also the physical, because then I'm getting the G-force loads and kind of getting myself back in driving shape. There's different physical fitness things that I can do to try and be in driving shape, but the best training is just to drive.
And you actually got your start in karting. You were the number 1 ranked Minimax driver, according to your bio, at 11 years old. What was the Minimax series or cars, and what was the competition like during that season?
Yeah, so in karting, I kind of worked my way up to the ranks. My parents, when they started me out in it, they thought it was just going to be a quick little hobby. We'll run out to the track every weekend, maybe every other weekend kind of a deal. Like people, they take their motorcycles out and go for a Sunday drive kind of deal. Well, I think I changed their plans pretty quickly. And by the time I was 8, I was already going, actually 9. We were doing trips to Italy and getting to race nationally. And so that Rotax Minimax class was kind of the international platform here in the U.S. where we could test our skills against other drivers. And so the main series that we ran was Challenge of the Americas, which was the main West Coast series, along with the Florida Winter Tour. And those two categories alone are super competitive because you're getting drivers from, all over the U.S. You're getting drivers from Canada, South America, some European drivers. So to have that versatility as a driver to compete against all those other drivers on the racetrack was pretty good in my training. And then from there, I worked my way up into Rotax Junior, and I did really well there. I went to the Grand Finals, the Rotax Grand Finals in Spain and Portugal. And then I got recognized by CRG, which is a big manufacturer in karting. And they actually offered me a factory ride to race KZ2 karts, which were shifter karts over in Europe with them. And so during my transition year, which was 2016, from karts to cars, I did a wide variety of different vehicles. I drove go-karts, I did Corvettes, I did dirt modifieds. I actually drove a little bit of NASCAR, the Formula cars. And during that time, I was spending with the CRG team over in Europe driving those KZs. And at 14 years old, that was quite the experience. And I think I can say that a lot of my ability as a driver has come from my experience in go-karts, just because it's a great learning platform. You see many great drivers, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg, Ayrton Senna. All those drivers in the Formula car industry that are kind of up there as the legends, they started out in go-karts.
And you went from go-karting, as you said there, you pretty much drove everything when you turned 16. And how does karting prepare you to jump into cars like you said, the dirt modifieds and the Corvettes and the other open wheel cars that you ended up racing during that time?
I think the main benefit of the go-karts is that everything happens so fast. I don't think people realize when we say we are going 75, 80 miles an hour, that means that we're taking corners at those speeds in a go-kart. And I think it's the same way in a car. The Formula cars that we're in, they don't have a super-duper high top speed, but the ability of the car to handle through the corners is unbelievable, and that's what makes them so fun to drive. And so in karting, that was, even more so, I believe, and just how tight the tracks were, and it just allowed you to feel the car more, because in a go-kart, there's no suspension, so you feel every little detail that you're getting feedback from through the seat and the steering wheel and your pedals and everything else. And one of my favorite things to do in the go-kart was to drive in the rain. And so my car handling abilities, I think, came a lot from that, because I was so used to driving slick tires, slick track, and then going from that to a dirt modified. The dirt modified was just like drifting a go-kart to me. It was something fairly simple, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't do well in it, being a rookie, but it was something that I think that most rookies would have struggled at more so than I did.
Well, you did, like you said, you did have the rain in the go-karts to get used to, but that's got to be a wild sensation being in a go-kart. There's very little metal around you at all, and you're in the rain. What is the sensations like of driving a go-kart in inclement weather? Because we've seen in regular cars, it's hairy as it is, but then you go into a go-kart which has these skinny little tires. It has to be an even worse a feeling.
Yeah, I think it is. And it's so cool because one of my favorite things ever is driving on a changing track, because every lap is different. You have to find a new line every single lap. And that's kind of the beauty in racing, is that nothing is ever an absolute. And so you always have to be learning and adapting. And so in a go-kart, it was even more so when changing conditions are like that. I would lean forward in the seat or lean back in the seat because you're not strapped in. I mean, you can move your body weight around and you can feel the difference in the cart's handling because of that. So if you're accelerating, you want to push back into the back of the seat, create more grip in the rear, lean forward over the front tires to turn in. And so all that kind of stuff, I think, taught me the dynamics of a race car. Because a race car is, you're doing all those same things, but with your feet. When you hit the brakes, it throws the weight forward onto the front end of the car, makes the rear end light, and that's what causes oversteer on the way into a corner. So that's where you get your rotation from, and that's what you want. And then vice versa, hit the gas, loads the rear end of the car to create rear grip. It's just G-load, I mean, pushing the weight back there, and it's just so cool to learn all those dynamics in a more easy-to-understand mechanical view, which comes from go-karting.
So in the go-karts, it's really you can actually help influence the weight since you're not strapped down like you are, say, in the Pro 2000s. You can really lift, lean back and forth, and really influence how the car is running. So you said earlier that your parents thought it was going to be maybe every other weekend or every weekend type thing. What were they thinking when all of a sudden they're flying you to Italy to race go-karts at 9 years old?
I don't know what they were thinking. I think they thought it was a phase. My mom and my dad always joke around. They're like, why couldn't you have played baseball or something? We would have bought you as many bats as you wanted.
At least hockey, you'd only have to go to Canada.
Exactly. I could have been a phenomenal hockey player, I'm sure. But no, not the case. I decided to be a race car driver instead. I don't think I had another option, though.
I need to know, kind of sidetracked, but like I've been on this since you said you went to Italy. Like, I've been to Canada. That is as far as I've ever been out of the country in my life. I don't even own a passport. I need to know, though. So, like, very cool, and I'm sure, like, everything was a whirlwind, and you were focusing on racing, but it's a two-part question for you. The first part of it, what was your favorite part about being in Italy / overseas outside of racing? Because that's just cool in and of itself, very Formula-esque. But my second question part of this is, too, since you met all of these people from different countries, I need to know, did you learn Sting Ray in other languages? Because if I had a name that could transfer over, I would be calling myself it in every language. So those are my two-part questions. I want to know.
So that's a good question. I'm going to answer the non-racing side first. And so I've been to, let's see, I don't even know how many countries, but one of my favorite places I've been to was Belgium. And that was just so cool to see the history there and all the guilds that they have, the amazing architecture and everything. I mean, there was a church that we visited while we were there that had a cannonball stuck in the pillar from like the 1400s. And I walk in there, I'm like, the city that I live in wasn't even a thought in the world during that time. And there's a cannonball sitting there in the pillar. So that was kind of cool to see. And then Italy, I mean, is beautiful. And where we were, it was even more so just because it was the karting side of the world. That's what I loved to do at the time. And so I was treated very well by the Taninis, who are the owners of CRG Racing. And they put me up in this, it's called an Aggie Turismo. And it's like a hotel farm. And so we stayed in this people's house, essentially. I mean, it would be similar to what I guess an Airbnb would be now. But they have dinner ready for you in their little dinner area at night, and they are all fresh vegetables and fresh meats from the animals that they raise. And so that was, like, unbelievable. The food there was by far my favorite from anywhere else in the world, and I kind of miss it to the day. And I kind of have to get my pasta fix every once in a while just to try and fight off those urges to shove my face full of foods that are not going to occupy that same area in my taste buds. But anyways, on the racing side, the best experience I've ever had in Europe, I was actually visiting Spa. And on the day that we were visiting Spa was a Ferrari kind of driver-owner experience day. And so they had like their Ferrari LaFerraris, the F44s or whatever they are out there on the racetrack driving around. It was kind of misting. And so it's kind of this cool dark cloud fog over the green hills tucked in this valley. And it's the most historic racetrack in my mind that you can probably, visit today and still see the same cars driving on it. And just about the time we were about to leave, we hear this F1 car start up. And, the old V10s and V8s just have that musical sound to them. And we got to see Michael Schumacher's championship-winning F1 car drive around Spa in the rain. And that to me was like, okay, that's it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life kind of deal. Formula cars that's what I wanted it to be. That's why I wanted to be a race car driver. It's just like magical.
That's got to be an incredible moment, especially to see a car that we know Michael Schumacher was second, maybe only to Senna when it came to racing in the rain. So to see that car running around Spa in the wet had to be an incredible sight. So you come back to the United States to race, and you get partnered up with Juncos. How did you join up with them? And talk about your rookie season in the Pro 2000 Championship. How did it go for you, in your opinion?
So before I made the step from karts to cars, we actually had a pretty great scenario. Peter Rossi is now my manager, and he's the father of Alexander Rossi. And so to have that kind of experience under his belt and knowing what we need to do to get me to that top level was invaluable. I mean, just having him there to tell us, like, okay, don't worry about this. You need to focus on what's ahead kind of a deal going through the hard times. And so having him going to my rookie season was, like I said, invaluable. And I ran with World Speed that first year, which was actually with the old Pro Mazda car, which is now considered Indy Pro 2000. And then that was kind of a tough year. It was my first time in a real tough Formula car series, and a car had never been in previous. And so I was kind of learning the engineering side, driver's side, and then the next year I kind of had to start all that over because the new car came out. I switched teams. World Speed was no longer running, so I ran with Pelfrey. And then that year was kind of rough. We had so many different issues that went along. I had my high at Indianapolis, crossing the Brickyard in third place, so that was pretty magnificent. But from there, we said, okay, next year we want to go with the team that we wanted to go with forever, and that was Juncos Racing. And that's just because, they've proven themselves so many times that they are the best, and they develop the drivers. I think that was most shown in Kyle Kaiser when he won his Indy Lights championship, because he went from not being the greatest driver on the track in his Pro Mazda days to winning the Indy Lights championship, and not only winning it, but like showing up to the last race and going, okay, all I have to do is finish and I'll be fine. So that's pretty dominant in my mind. And to run with a team that has so much experience and so much passion for the sport is amazing. Ricardo Juncos, he's been in it a long time. His brother is now my mechanic. And so to work side by side with these guys and have them tell me the old stories of how they got into racing and back when they were in Argentina and they were, working out of their own house as a mechanic shop is unbelievable. And they still have that deep, burning passion inside of them to win.
And your results definitely picked up with the teams. You go in 2019, you finish fourth in the championship last season, which is setting up for a great 2020. What are your expectations for your season when we finally do get back or finally get to racing in your guys' case?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tough year. Obviously, any year in this series is tough just because there's so many great drivers out there. Last year, Kyle Kirkwood was phenomenal in the second half of the season. My teammate Rasmus Lind kind of set the tone in the first half of the year. And so I was chasing those guys and, battling it out with them for most of the year. And so having those guys move on, I think it kind of opens the door for some of the rookies like Braden Eves or maybe Hunter McElroy. Those are all great drivers, and they have great teams backing them up. So I think it'll be a good battle throughout the season, but I do expect to win this year. I think that this is the best chance that I have at, showing what I actually have as potential. And I think it's really good. I'm really excited to actually, run at the front and hopefully be dominant in a race car. But again, this series is not the top level. This is just a stepping stone to move on into the next series, which would be Indy Lights and then on to IndyCar. And for me, that means that I have to develop into the best driver I can be while I'm here. So that means learning through my experiences, whether that be good or bad, And so it's going to be a fun ride, I think. I'm looking forward to it.
In your bio, it says, your dream is to be either IndyCar or Formula One champion. Do you think that if you get that call maybe to go to Formula 2 and Indy Lights at the same time, which one would you go for?
That's a good question. I mean, if anyone's opening the door for me, I'm probably going to try and run through it, especially if it's towards a race car. That's not too big of an argument for me. But, I mean, Indy Lights is a great series. I think they struggled with numbers for the last couple of years, but you still see great drivers moving up through it. Patricio Ward, Oliver Askew, Kyle Kirkwood. I mean, those are all guys that are now in Indy Lights and then moving on into IndyCar. So in my mind, it's a great series to learn in. It's a great series to move on from, and actually to race in. I think the whole road to Indy is kind of unique in the sense that you're racing on the big show weekends, right? You're racing alongside these IndyCar drivers that you've looked up to, and some of them I've raced with. So it's just pretty cool to see that they're showing you kind of the front door to the rest of your career. Whereas I think F2 would be a kind of a reset for me. I mean, as cool as it would be to run on the F2 Formula One circuit, I think that I like where I'm at. USA is my home, so I'd like to stay here.
And then we would love to see you get up there in what is becoming an expanded grid now in IndyCar. And as we looking forward towards the 2020 season, and judging by the Indy Pro Indy Pro section of the Road to Indy website, they're going to have a series test for you guys again at Mid-Ohio before getting started with the triple header at Road America. The Streets of St. Petersburg that would have started your season is now going to be the last run of the year. How surreal is it going to be to go to the track that just a couple of months ago you were getting ready to race and they ended up calling it off? Now you're going to go there to decide a championship, and judging by how things go with COVID-19, that could possibly be one of the few races with fans all year. What is that going to feel like when you get back to St. Pete?
They're just trying to confuse me, I'm sure. That is the only goal of this. I think it'll be really cool. St. Pete's a great track, and I think for a finale race, it's going to just attract that many more fans there. I mean, every year it's quite exciting to walk through the paddock and see all those different fans and supporters be there, and I think it'll only be magnified. I'm a little nervous, though, because I think that's the rainy season there. So it might be interesting racing through the streets of St. Pete with those concrete walls and a wet track.
Yeah, it does kind of get kind of rainy, and then you also have to deal with hurricane and hurricane remnants around that time. So
it just provides a nice
hopefully you
breeze.
don't see any.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully we don't see any flying cars on the racetrack from a hurricane or anything. That would be somewhat exciting, I think.
Just yours flying across the finish line, right?
Yeah,
I mean, the front straightaway is the airport runway, so I mean, there's always a chance, right?
Well, let's hope you guys only take off into turn one and not take off into the sky, because unfortunately these cars aren't really programmed well to fly once they get off the ground. But you guys are going to go to a place...
We still see it happen.
Yeah. And you guys actually go to an interesting room. You guys are actually going to run, according to this schedule, Lucas Oil Raceway for round 11. That's a short oval for these cars. One of the few oval races, really only two oval races on this schedule, when the vast majority of it is left and right-hand turns on street and road courses. How much of a shift is it to go from doing the street and road course thing, then having to switch over to go do the ovals for 2 straight races, and then go back to road and street for the ending of the season?
Yeah, I think Lucas Oil is just so unique in that scenario just because we're running that high line. I mean, there's 3 lanes there, and you don't want to get anywhere below that top lane. So you're running against the concrete wall the entire race pretty much, unless you're trying to make a move. And even then, you maybe want to move into the inside. So last year was actually my best race was Lucas Oil, I think. Going into testing, our cars were 8th and 9th on the grid. And so going into the qualifying and race, we were just making small adjustments to fine-tune our oval setup just because it's so different than a road setup. I mean, there's so many different scenarios and factors that go into an oval racing car because it's more up to the car than it typically is. And so on the engineering side of things, you see a big difference over the course of a race when the engineering isn't right. So my first year at Lucas Oil was pretty intimidating. I didn't really know what to do when running side by side with someone in the concrete wall, but now I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a really fun track.
And just listening to you talk about everything from an engineering standpoint and the weight transfers, I've got to wonder at some point, maybe somewhere down the road, you think maybe race engineer could be, you think we could see Sting Ray Robb sitting on top of pit box as a race engineer one day?
I don't know what God has in store for me, but if that sounds to be the path that he's leading me down, I think, yeah, absolutely I'd do it. I love understanding the physics and mechanics behind a race car. I think it's something that every driver should know, and by no means am I an expert. And so I like learning, and I think that if the chance arose and I had the knowledge available to me, of course, I'd do it.
Okay, well, I want to do a tie-in question really quick since we were speaking of Lucas Oil, and we know what it's right down the road from. When you are an IndyCar driver and you win the Indy 500, what kind of milk are you drinking?
I don't know. The creamiest kind they got.
I'm just saying, I knew it here first. Like, I'm ready. I go to the that's like the every year kind of thing. So I want to be prepared.
So
when I go and I see you win.
Drink at the Indy when you win the Indy 500?
Yeah, that's what you do.
Okay, if I ever win the Indy 500, go ahead.
I think that the original milk that was drank at the Indy 500 was buttermilk.
It was.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
I'm drinking strawberry milk.
I don't know how
different.
That long
I'm being very different.
So I had to ask, man. I mean, since you decided you're going to keep it in, the U.S. of A., that's where we're destined here. So.
Yep. There you go.
Before it's listed in the Indy Star newspaper for your race, because they tell who drinks what. Mm-hmm. I want them to be like, I already know what he's going to drink.
I think you can put your money down and bet on whole milk, solid glass of cold whole milk.
I mean, only a little bit actually goes in your mouth anyway. We're really just bathing at that point.
Spraying it everywhere after that.
Exactly. Yeah, have you gotten to go to the Indy 500? Have you, as a fan, gotten to enjoy it yet?
I have not. Every year that has been finals week for me at school. And actually last year I missed walking across the stage as a graduate because we had the race at Lucas Oil that same night. And so this would have been the first year that I got to see the Indy 500 in May, but now it's looking like it'll be a little later in the year.
But still, if you get to go, it's something.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm hoping that maybe I could get a little insider view of it by, maybe visiting a pit box here or there.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully, they're talking about possibly moving that race back as far as October, maybe, to try and get fans there with how big that facility is. Hopefully, we all will get to see fans in the stands for the Indy 500. And since Caitlin's spoken, we're running up against it here. During the entire COVID-19 Red Flag series that we've been doing here, we were trying to end on a light note, especially at the beginning when things were a bit more traumatic than they are now. Now we're just annoyed about people going outside and not wearing masks. We were asking everybody a question about a specific item that all the way back at the start of this just disappeared even before we went on lockdown, to the point you couldn't find it in stores until just now. So for the final time during the COVID-19 Red Flag series, I'm going to toss it over to Caitlin to ask this final question.
Oh, man, the last one of the last one. All right, here it is, Sting Ray. I don't know how it is over in Idaho, so now we're going to get educated. I need to know, when everything happened, obviously you had to get back from St. Pete first. But when you got back, did you guys end up having enough toilet paper?
So funny you should ask. My parents actually own a small grocery store here on this side of the world. And so I have been stocking toilet paper like no one's business. And I don't kid you, we had 2 truckloads of toilet paper that came in right before I left to go to St. Pete, completely gone when we got back. So, to be honest, yes, we did run out, and we're still out. So, restocking is still happening, and I'm still quite busy putting toilet paper on the shelves.
You know, I wasn't expecting a lot of answers, and that certainly was not one of them.
That was
that
not,
jam.
that was
I
not
like
the
that.
answer I was expecting either. Sting Ray Robb, this guy is going to be going places. We expect a lot of wins out of him during the Pro Mazda series, or it's not even Pro Mazda series anymore, the Pro 2000 series. And hey, things go well, maybe in a couple of years we'll see him driving around in the NTT Data IndyCar series. Stingray, thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to have you back on when the season is back underway, and enjoy the rest of what little off time remains.
Awesome. Thank you so much, you guys, for having me, and I hope to talk to you guys soon.
Definitely. Thank you so much. So that was Sting Ray Robb here on the Extra Mile on iSports Radio. The last of the COVID red flag series of interviews, but that doesn't mean that the guests are going away. We are going to continue this interview segment under a new banner, as I was thinking about it during the last week, and I thought, you can learn a lot about somebody in a 15-minute chat with them. So that is the inspiration for the newest segment that we're going to be adding to the Extra Mile starting next week, as we're finalizing the first guest. Supposed to be NHRA Funny Car driver J.R. Todd there. A good 15 minutes. That's going to be the name of the new segment. So next week, we're going to be spending the first of that series with J.R. Todd, driving for Coletta Motorsports. Going to get to chat with him. I cannot wait. And guys, that was one of the best interviews of the season. I think the one thing that really struck me is he is a student of the sport. And he's got a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the weight transfer, just how these cars work, and I think that's going to help him going on to help Stingray going on to the upper stages, including the NTT Data IndyCar series.
Yes, I definitely think he has got a lot going for him, and I definitely feel what makes a good champion is not only driving skill but knowledge of the car itself.
Mm-hmm. And I think he's got a lot of that, and now it's just a wait for the road to Indy drivers as they'll get back going when the series gets to Road America. As we know, the IndyCar series proper is going to get started at Texas at the Genesis 300. But before we go, for the first time in 2 months, we got to make picks, y'all. We have nearest the win picks to make.
That's still a thing?
It is, actually, and Matt has informed us for a special wrinkle. Whoever you pick for this Sunday, you also have to ride with on Wednesday. So choose carefully. Michael, who you got?
He's never let me down. Kyle Busch.
Caitlin, who you riding with?
Darlington. You know what? I can only do this once. In the return out of retirement, I'm going Matt Kenseth.
Really?
You know what? Let's live large. I can only do it once.
Mike, you picked Kyle Busch last time we had a race, so you're going to have to pick somebody
Oh,
else.
jeez. Truex then.
Okay. I have no idea who to go with, especially because there's no practice and no qualifying. They actually pulled qualifying via basically lottery balls on the NASCAR Race Hub here about a couple hours ago. So I'm going to go out on the longest of limbs, and I'm going to pick the pole sitter, Brad Keselowski, at Darlington. So that is my pick. And if you want to join us for Nearest the Win, tweet it out, hashtag Nearest the Win with your pick for NASCAR in Darlington. And currently in the point standings, I am leading with 2 points. The USRN crew is behind me with 1 point. Don't know how long that is going to last, but we shall see going into this next couple of weeks, as we're going to have 2 races a week, a lot of time to catch up points, and we still don't even have IndyCar and F1, so who knows how many points are going to be available this season. So we're going to have to get these picks right, which means a whole lot of jinxing is about to get started.
Yeah.
So that's going to do it for this episode of The Extra Mile. Remember, if you want to catch up with us... Oh, Turin asked at the end, was Caitlin going to be still asking the toilet paper question? I think it's run its course by now. So I think we are going to go ahead and retire the toilet paper question. We'll probably come up with something else for the 15 minutes interviews, but we'll see from there.
I'm pretty creative.
Yeah. So Caitlin will come up with something to end us on a high note. But I think Angela... Sting Ray was close, but I think Angela Rutsch won the TP challenge, as we're calling it. I think that answer...
I mean, I don't know how you beat $6,000 toilets.
Yeah.
That don't require toilet paper.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that wins. So that will do it for this episode of The Extra Mile. Remember, if you want to talk to us via Twitter, Michael's at Stargazer_FX. I'm at DK Junior 12. Caitlin's at Seam Radio. Check out her show, Not What It Seems, at 5 o'clock, right before this one, here on IE Sports Radio. And if you've missed any episode of any IE Sports Radio show, check out the Spreaker Show Reel, iTunes, and other places where podcasts can be heard. And keep it locked to our social media pages for the information on what guests are joining the IE Sports Radio shows on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And also, join the website, IESportsRadio.com. Get in on the conversation on the site. Learn more about your IE Sports Radio host. Listen to past episodes and more on IESportsRadio.com. And I have a new show as well at WBGR where I work. Check that out. 2 Wide Tuesdays, the only show on WBGR dedicated to the fastest sport in the world. That's motorsports. Check that out at 2 p.m. on Tuesdays. So for Michael and Caitlin, I'm Daryl. This has been The Extra Mile, and we will see you at the next green flag. Good night, everybody.